LTL carriers don't have any incentive to make billing better because none of the players, there's only 10 or 12 players and nobody cares. And the shippers don't have a way to fight back. And so they ended up creating a whole new industry. I don't know how long ago this was, but there's companies that exist solely for the purpose of auditing freight bills. They don't do anything else. All they do is take paper invoices or email invoices, check to make sure it's accurate, invoice the shipper, and then pay the carrier. That's their entire company. My thesis is that that's going to go away and it's already a dying industry. As soon as we get to a point where the NMFC gets adjusted, we have better API pricing, the TMS's required dimensions, NMFC code, and Google verification, and the shippers can get a service of freight bill audit without the pay portion, then you can actually eliminate an industry. And that's what my LinkedIn post was about. Before we go, this is just a fun little thought experiment or like a analogy, but if Russia and Ukraine are fighting a war, the military industrial complex is pretty happy about that because when Congress passes a bill to give Ukraine $100 billion, the $100 billion doesn't actually just get sent to Ukraine. It actually goes to Lockheed Martin to make more missiles and to Raytheon to make more tanks and F-35s. If there isn't war, then they don't need to make as many things. And if the U.S. isn't a war, then somebody else ought to be in a war so that the U.S. can help supply the weapons, or else they're out of a job. And so the military industrial complex and the freight bill audit and pay firms are the same thing. If there wasn't any billing variances, then there wouldn't be any need for a freight bill audit firm. And if the carriers made it easier for pricing and the shippers could just interact with them better and get accurate quotes and billing, then there wouldn't be any place for a freight bill audit firm, so they would disappear. And so the carriers and the freight bill audit pay firms are kind of friendly and they kind of coexist and they know they need each other. And so if the carriers aren't going to be forced to have better APIs and better pricing by the shippers, the freight bill audit and pay firms are just keeping the shippers happy by making sure everything gets paid and the carriers get paid and the shippers are generally happy with it. But there's really no incentive to move forward. And the only thing that'll break that paradigm is APIs, TMSs, and managed transit providers. It's the only thing that's going to break the paradigm. And, at Rocket, we're probably going to have like a blue ocean for a long time because it'll be probably a decade before all this actually changes. And we're going to be doing it this way for a while before that happens.
We talked about this last week, that shippers will stay with brokers probably way longer, overstay their welcome in terms of what they could be getting going and building their program separately for many reasons we talked about. But freight bill auditing is one of the biggest. It seems like every new tech that comes out or new efficiency that comes out, there's a new pinch point created. It's almost like it creates a new market. So the moment we created, or third-party logistic providers created a spot where somebody could get multiple quotes from different carriers based off of one shipment quote, that's awesome. That was a great expansion into tech, and it allows shippers to save a lot of time by just picking the best price or whatever their priorities are for shipment by seeing the entire rate table. The new issue with that is every carrier has different rules, different everything within their tariffs. So now freight bill auditing becomes a big thing. Whereas if you were just working with one carrier, you knew exactly what a limited access was in comparison to a residential. You knew basically everything that came in with these bills, and you knew which ones you could get adjusted and which ones you just had to pay because maybe it was set up wrong. We bring all these carriers in, and now we somehow have to map what each variance is for each carrier, and there's a huge gap there. And so like you said, there's a new industry of specific companies just taking, did the quote match the invoice? If it didn't, what was the difference? And should we try to dispute it? And I think you said it before, there's anywhere from 8 to 15% of savings left on the table if you actively freight bill audit. Now, third parties got big into that and they started to audit these. A good logistics partner will audit them before they send you the invoice, but we've seen it time and time again where you'll get an invoice instantly for that shipment, and then there might be the shipper decides to dispute it, and then there's a credit or a debit with that, and now all of a sudden your accounting got all messed up. And so there's a massive gap there.
And some of the big box brokers will just, because freight bill auditing is such a headache in LTL, they just bill off of quote, right? And then if there is a freight bill audit or freight bill variance that comes to the third party, they pass it through with a markup, and they pass it through as a balance due, an additional invoice. And that's kind of been the standard because the big box brokers can get away with it. There are freight agents and there's smaller brokers that do it the right way. What would be the way that, Rocket does it as far as if there is a billing variance? How do we handle that for a customer?
The way that Rocket does it, if there is a variance, a customer will not see that invoice until that variance is disputed. So our team will do some digging, get the appropriate paperwork that backs up that variance to prove that we can fight that variance and get that disputed for the customer. And more importantly, if there is a variance that cannot be disputed, we will let our customer know before we send out that invoice. In a lot of the industry, just bills the invoice in hopes that nobody catches it. So
Yeah. Worldwide Express, I'll always call out bad competitors. Worldwide Express is good at some things, bad at a lot, but they notoriously will not only bill right away and then send balance dues and just hope that you don't catch it. And whatever ones you do catch, there's 5 that you didn't, and they know that they're going to be profitable. So they'll sometimes just be like, oh, you caught this? And they'll just be like, that's a credit. We'll just pay for it. But they're really actually making money on all the ones you didn't see come through. And then on top of that, they add a markup and a billing fee to do the additional bill. So they're just adding fees everywhere. And then they have late fees if you pay after 15 days. And then I've seen this happen when I've audited invoices. So I'm not just picking on Worldwide. I've seen it happen from Echo too. But they will send a balance due invoice later than when they sent the other one, but off the old terms because that's when that shipment actually invoiced. And then even if you pay that one on time, it's late because of the shipment date. And so they'll charge 3.5% late fee. And they get away with it because they're Worldwide Express. They're $5 billion now with their whole group. So there's a lot to be fixed.
In the past weeks, we've been talking about the blended model that we find is a massive advantage to clients that can pull in direct tariffs that they have with carriers and utilize our third-party blankets or CSPs alongside that. The next issue that comes across with that type of model is how do you do freight bill auditing? When you have a direct tariff, it's billed directly to the shipper. When it's a blanket or a CSP, it's in care of somebody. We have to find a way to navigate that because there isn't really a way in the industry right now. And the hard part is finding a way to navigate that without adding a markup to it or a cost plus situation to that. There's also issues with trying to dispute somebody's direct tariff as an outside party. We've seen it time and time again where if the carrier doesn't know you and you're trying to dispute on behalf of a customer, there's no chance you're going to win that dispute.
Sales rep.
Yeah, if that customer disputes it with their sales rep, there's a very good chance. And so it's really hard to offer that ability to dispute something when you don't own the tariff. And so there's no good way to do it in the industry, and Rocket's trying to figure out a good way to do that without a markup and added cost associated with that process.
Uniquely, if you have multiple tariffs in one platform, whether it's direct, third party, a blanket rate, CSP, and you're combining them in a platform, you get the convenience of booking everything. The challenge you then have is that there's multiple bill to on the BOLs, and you don't have a normalization in the tariffs as far as billing terms and who's paying the bill and who's receiving it. So freight bill auditing becomes kind of a nightmare. And because that's so prevalent in LTL, I think that the solution is going to be freight bill audit rather than freight bill audit and pay. And that's our unique way of thinking about it to eliminate markup and cost for the shippers. And, that markup and cost is valid. Those companies exist for a reason. They're going to float money. They're going to take risk. They're going to spend time disputing and catching the variances. But if you can take out some of the risk, if we don't have to float the money, if we don't have to pay the carrier, if we don't have to dispute it, but if we can at least have a system of record where the quote and the bill come in and it can be audited with the technology, and we can then present it to our customer in an easily digestible format where they can say, hey, these 10 invoices don't match, and here's the reasons why, then we let them take that to their sales rep on their direct tariffs and try to get a concession. And Michael hit on it earlier. It's not that easy for a third party to get a concession because maybe that customer is kind of being a pain for this carrier, but they've got 100 other customers that they have to worry about in their relationship with the carrier, and they can't push too hard. They can't have one customer's dispute hold up their aging for all their other customers. And so it gets muddy. And I think if you just keep the direct relationship, you have the advantage of leverage, one-on-one relationship, but you still have to have a way to audit it without manual labor. And that's what we're trying to fix at Rocket.